back to something. The United States has a base in Djibouti, and China has a naval facility in Djibouti. When we look at the map of things and how the United States, the UK, and Israel are now occupying a strategic island that belongs to the Yemeni people and the Yemeni nation, and then we look at the disarray that they are causing in Sudan and those surrounding nations, isn't this a play against Russia and China strategically to make chaos?
My internet.
Okay. To create chaos and havoc, and so that China and Russia cannot do trade and also win-win situations, and also have a military base or naval base in those strategic waterways or those strategic areas. What say you on the matter? Because it seems, if you look at the map, you'll see how the United States is trying to control the waterways and trying to prevent China and Russia from helping African nations from becoming totally independent.
Oh, totally. I mean, I'm glad you brought it up. The Djibouti base is the only Chinese overseas military base in the world. United States have military base all over the world, and they have so-called the lily pad strategy in Africa. They will play right now. U.S. have military presence in every African country. People can look it up, and in fact, the Niger recently is in the news. Many people don't know. Right now, there's 1,100 U.S. military of personnel on the ground in Niger. Like, people don't even know we're in Niger. Like, people, the only time I think people heard anything was that U.S. That the U.S. troops got killed in Niger a couple of years ago, and that's when, like, what, we have troops in Niger? What the hell are we doing in Niger? And of course we're in Niger because Niger have a rich uranium deposit. And like, France heavily depends on that supply, and because France is a heavily nuclear power, and they need France doesn't have natural resources. Who are kidding? They get all their natural resources from Africa, and they have this whole institution called the CFA franc. So all these Western, formerly French colony African, now independent African nations, their currency is called CFA francs, and one of the agreement is all these countries have to, first of all the CFA francs is not manufactured in Africa. They're printed by the banks in France, and these African nations have to keep 50% of their reserve in the banks in France. I mean, like, this is this is just how it has been working for the past 50, 60 years, ever since the end of World War II and end of colonialism. Is they have this is a real neo-colonialism institution. They have all these resources in Africa. They get taken out of the ground, extracted, and converted into money deposit in Swiss bank, in French banks, and this is what's propping up all the French economy. And this is why people are on the street in Niger, in Mali, and all these places. They're like, we don't want France here. We don't want the Westerners here. We were sick and tired of you guys. We prefer Russia. They're openly waving Russian flags in Niger because. They're the ones on the ground bearing the brunt of the real Western debt trapping and military intervention, and they're saying enough is enough. And if you look at what why, so they ask, okay, why U.S. troops is in Niger, right? Their official reason is U.S. is in Niger and in parts of West Africa to fight terrorism. Oh, wait. Where does the terrorism come from? Oh, because U.S. supported a whole bunch of jihadists to overthrow Gaddafi flooded with them with weapons. So after Libya has been destroyed and destabilized, all that weapons and all these jihadists suddenly flood into across the Sahara and to all the Sahel regions of West Africa. And suddenly U.S. has a need to send in troops to deal with the terrorism problem. And what have they done? Like Libya is already like 2011, 2012. Now it's a fully decades later, U.S. military has been in West Africa fighting terrorism, quote unquote. They're just more terrorists. What happened? How did that? And now you have Al Qaeda in West Africa fighting Russia's Wagner group. It's like, what the hell is going on? People who don't know, it's like, what the hell is going on? Well, I mean, Al Qaeda or these jihadist group often turn up very conveniently when U.S. State Department wants them. Like after Libya, they take them. Seymour Hersh wrote a great article called "The Rat Line," exposed how the CIA work with their allies to transport jihadis from Libya to Syria to fight Assad. And it's the same thing they're doing in West Africa, man. They send in all these jihadis in, and then they give the excuse for U.S. to send in some military, and this endless intervention, the endless destability and war, and then they continue the extraction to the banks of Europe, banks in America. And this is what they want to preserve. They don't want China. Of course, they don't want China to come in to build roads and infrastructure. You're spoiling their game. I mean, this is what they did. They have made Africa their little playground, and the Africans are sick and tired of that. But we are to believe, by New York Times or Wall Street Journal, that China is the big baddies. That's bring instability in Africa. I mean, we get insane amount of propaganda here in the West. It's just ridiculous.
It reminds me of the United States being in Colombia and in Latin America fighting the narco terrorists and never ever progressing fighting the narco terrorists. But there were no narco terrorists until the United States funded the Contras and all of this. And then when you look around, you see there were no terrorists or Boko Haram and Al Qaeda and ISIS in Northern Africa until the United States destabilized the Middle East and destabilized Libya, Northern Africa. And they're saying that they're there to fight terrorists, but the people are tired of the lies. And France and the United States and NATO have been there for years upon years, and the situation is only deteriorating. The economic situation is deteriorating, and now Europe is paying. This is what I'm saying. Europe is paying the price for this because now there's an influx of migrants, and what you hear in Europe, and you hear this racism spewed. They won't assimilate. They come over here illegally. But the average person in Europe, they don't connect the dots that it was the European leaders' foreign policy, military policy, and economic policies that made this happen. When you destroy governments, when you destroy institutions that make governments viable and nations independent, what do you expect? The people will flee the hell that you've created for a promise of something better, and so we see that on an everyday basis with European and U.S. policy. And connecting something, I want to go to China again because it's just something on my mind about this. Now, with the United States and Europe, waging a war against Russia and Ukraine, and Russia being the largest nuclear power on the face of planet Earth, the U.S. State Department, the U.S. White House, and the U.S. Pentagon openly stated that they see China as the greatest and the most pressing threat to U.S. national security. And if you hear that, you have to say, are we in bizarro world? I mean, is China waging wars of aggression around the world? China is trying to prevent war from breaking out because China is trying to trade. China is trying to make money. And where are we at with this situation?
Yeah. So, I mean, just look at the track records in the last 40 years. I mean, since In the last 40 years, China has not fought a single war. And the record speak for itself when it comes to the United States. I mean, there's a very few times when United States is not involved in a war. And I want to like go back to what you said about the Contras. Yeah, United States CIA enabled the Contras. They brought them the drugs to Florida. They brought them to New York, and CIA helped distribute cracks to the black community. This is not conspiracy theory. This is well proven, and now they're trying to blame the opiate crisis in U.S. on China. It's like, you guys are crazy, man. Isn't it weird? Wherever U.S. military turns up, there will be a growing opium and heroin problem. Like this has happened in northern Myanmar before, in the Golden Triangle area, when after the Chinese Civil War, the communists once they pushed the former the nationalist government out of China. Some of them ran to northern Myanmar, set up shop there, and they work closely with CIA, and they turned that region, the Golden Triangle region, to become the world's foremost production base for opium and heroin. And a lot of U.S. Servicemen during the Vietnam War, they're getting flooded with cheap heroin coming from the Golden Triangle area, produced by guys working with the CIA. And then when they come home, they bring the heroin problems back home. And then after U.S. went to Afghanistan, Taliban actually eradicated the opium production just before 9/11. And after U.S. went into Afghanistan suddenly became the world's main base of supply for opium and heroin to Europe, to all across the world. And now Taliban is back in power. They are getting rid of that old poppy fields again. So you're like, why is that? Why is that? Well, I mean, it's obvious, because like for the CIA, the drug money, it's harder to trace. It's off the books. They don't have to be answerable to anybody because that's a favorite ploy for the intelligence agencies like the CIA to work with the drug cartels, and because that they can engage their nefarious activity without being tracked. And sorry, what was your original question? I got a little sidetracked.
In this world, if it's not bizarro world, can the United States be waging a war of aggression against Russia and Ukraine, and yet perceive China as its greatest threat?
Yeah, I mean, it really goes back to they're feeling threatened by a rising China, and it's not a threat to U.S. national security, because as we know, U.S. is bordered by two oceans, right? Atlantic and Pacific. U.S. homeland is very, very secure. What they're really worried is rise of China is challenging their own hegemony over the world. Right now, U.S. have all the military over the world. That's been financed by the U.S. dollar hegemony, the U.S. tech hegemony, right? There's three pillars of U.S. imperialism: technology, finance, and military. And right now, China is challenging at least two of those pillars: technology and finance. And China is coming close on the third one, on the military. So they're completely freaking out. It's like, oh my God, China is going to be the world's largest economy. Their navy is growing bigger. Like, we're not going to be able to push people around anymore. And that's unacceptable. And look at all the lashing out they're doing. They're not just confronting China and Russia. They're also confronting Iran right now. It's like you guys really, I remember Brzezinski famously said in his book, The Grand Chessboard, he said, like, the nightmare for the United States is that Russia, China, and Iran will combine together in form an anti-American alliance. Well, guess what? U.S. foreign policy in the last 40 years is doing its best to make sure that happens. And now, almost the majority of the Eurasian continent, when you slap the landmass of Russia, China, Iran together, That's like the majority of Eurasian continent now is against United States. I mean, this is a major own goal. But the decision maker in Washington, they don't see that. They're like very short term tunnel vision. Well, they're more interested in lining their own pockets. Really, they're just continue to get those kickback from the defense industries, right? And so they can retire comfortably in the Bahamas. You know, they don't really, they're not really thinking about long term right now. And you know, it's all about jobs, man. Jobs and careers. There's a job and careers at stake. And their job and career. They don't care about the other American jobs and career. And this is why, I mean, I think this is actually the fundamental difference between, say, the elite in China and the elite United States. And we all know the elite in US, they don't care about us. I mean, that's just an accepted fact now. That the elite, they're totally out of touch with average Americans, and they're greedy, and they will do whatever at the expense of the rest of us. Whereas in China, they actually care about poverty alleviation. I mean, what's U.S. poverty alleviation program? Join the military. Join the military. That is a U.S. poverty alleviation program. I mean, I was my freshman year, I went to high school in Kingwood Academy in Southside Chicago. And I remember, you know, it's my internet is. I'm in the middle of the jungle in Bali. I'm sorry, like my internet not very reliable.
You're in heaven right now. You're in heaven right now. Bali is beautiful, man. So go ahead, finish your thought.
I was in Kingwood Academy in south side of Chicago, 90% black student body, and the military recruiter would come regularly to our school, and they would literally tell my classmates, like, look, you know, you want a life outside the ghetto. You want to make something for yourself. Join the military. We're your only chance. We're your only chance to get out. I mean, that is a U.S. poverty alleviation program right now. I mean, it's obscene. It's ridiculous, but it keeps the military industrial complex going, because they just need bodies. Right, they just need bodies to operate their war, so the weapon manufacturers can get even richer. And it's, sorry, I may have went on a tangent. Did I answer your question originally about China?
You answered every question that I asked you, and that's why I'm telling you, I follow your work, and I love it when you get started. I mean, you go into so much, and people need to hear these things, and I hate when people get cut off, because you'll make a point, and sometimes on some shows they'll cut you off right when you're getting ready to get into, and I'm like, come on, let them finish. But so that's why I wanted you on my platform, because I want you to finish. But while you're finishing, I want to ask you a question, and this is of the greatest importance, especially when concerning China.